40 years ago, a 17-year-old girl in North Carolina vanished on her way home after a shift, leaving her car running by Lake Lucas and a town haunted by the question, where did she go? Police once suspected a family member, but with no body, no witnesses, no clues. The case quickly faded into obscurity. Yet, over the years, a young officer never stopped believing that the file held something unsaid. Then one day, while reopening a dusty old envelope, he discovered a detail so small it seemed insignificant, but it turned the entire truth of the disappearance upside down. Before we dive into that haunting story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the next cold cases revealed. Asheboro, North Carolina, summer of 1980. The sunset faded over the fields, leaving a dim golden light draped across low trees. Cicadas hummed by Lake Lucas, where a narrow road curved, reflecting the day's last glow. Emily Hartman, 17, just finished her shift at the vet clinic, driving her old yellow car out of the lot. She turned on the small radio, a faint country song playing, mingling with the breeze. Her blonde hair shifted slightly in the rearview mirror. Across town, the Hartman family's small house sat under weak yellow lamplight. Dinner had gone cold. Her mother, Claire, sat at the table, staring at an empty plate, waiting. The wall clock ticked, stretching each minute of quiet worry. Her father, Robert, stood by the window, gazing at the misty road. The clock passed dinner time, then the news hour. No one spoke, only the slow hum of the ceiling fan and the heat clinging to the walls filled the space. When the clock's hand crossed 9, Claire stood, grabbed the phone, and dialed the clinic. No answer. She called Emily's friends, then others. No one had seen her all afternoon. Unease rose, spreading through their shared glances. Robert grabbed a jacket and headed to the car. The road to Lake Lucas was nearly pitch black, with only faint lights from scattered houses in the distance. He slowed at the curve by the lake, stopped, stepped out, and looked around. The wind carried a cold, damp chill, lightly ruffling his hair. No familiar yellow car, no signs, only tree shadows and the water reflecting dim light. He returned, shoes caked in mud, saying nothing, just shaking his head to his wife. The house now held only the sound of a phone, ringing in vain. Claire dialed more numbers, calling anyone who might know where her daughter was. Each "No, I haven't seen her" tightened her chest. Dinner sat untouched, cold, the faint smell of cured meat lingering. She looked at Emily's empty chair, feeling something missing in the room that she couldn't name. Then she turned back to the phone, hands trembling, dialing again. The voice on the other end was steady, professional, but to her, each word deepened her fear. "My daughter hasn't come home," she said. Claire's voice broke over the line. At the station, a young officer sat up, gripping his pen tightly, sensing in the woman's voice a raw truth, not the fleeting panic of a teen out late. He jotted down details and transferred the call to his superior. 10 minutes later, Sheriff Tommy Dillard was roused from fitful sleep in his small house south of town. He'd handled hundreds of urgent calls in his career, but something in that woman's voice snapped him fully awake. That night, Asheboro's air was thick with heat, the damp earth smell lingering from an afternoon rain. As Dillard left his house, streetlights cast his shadow long and distorted on the asphalt. He climbed into the department's old Plymouth, started it, and heard the radio crackle. "Missing female minor after work shift, name Emily Hartman." Dillard said nothing. He just listened, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. In a small town like Asheboro, everyone knew, most everyone. Disappearances were rare. People knew each other, helped each other, and days passed quietly like the still surface of Lake Lucas each morning. Yet now, there was a gap in that familiar list of names, a young girl, 17, gone on her way home. Dillard reached the station and ordered an initial file opened. The first sheet read simply, "Female 17, lost contact after shift." He removed his hat, rubbed his forehead, and turned to the officer on duty. "Call the whole team. We move at first light." The order was swift, direct, no questions asked. Ashborough's police were used to small cases, but this time, no one wanted to wait. Before dawn, the town stirred. 2 patrol cars left the station, heading for Lake Lucas. Locals woke, hearing of the missing girl, grabbing flashlights, wading boots, some bringing hunting dogs. Morning fog was so thick, the station's yellow lights seemed to dissolve into the air. Searchers moved slowly, each step heavy on the damp ground. Shadows flickered through the mist, calls for the girl echoing then fading into the void. "Emily!" A neighbor's hoarse shout, carried off by the wind. Dillard trailed the group, eyes scanning the ground. He said nothing, just observed. The road around Lake Lucas was long and narrow, flanked by dense pine forests, the air thick with resin and water vapor. Muddy patches held clear tire tracks, but none fresh. As they neared the old bridge over the lake, Dillard paused, looking through the fog. Far off, a faint gleam reflected on the water, strange, not from the sun or streetlights. A young officer ran ahead, flashlight beam cutting through. "Sir, something's by the bridge," he called, voice rough. The group moved closer. Through the fog, a yellow car emerged, parked askew, headlights still on. The weak beams hit the rusted railing, reflecting on the water, creating 2 trembling halos. Someone in the group whispered, "That's her car." Dillard slowed, his weathered hand tightening on his flashlight. He said nothing, just stared at the car. No one spoke, only the wind and the soft lapping of water against the shore, steady like the breath of something sleeping beneath the lake. The next morning, as the fog began to lift, weak sunlight hit Lake Lucas, revealing the yellow car still parked by the bridge. Dewdrops coated its faded paint, making it look like something forgotten too long. Dillard stood a few steps away, arms crossed, watching the forensic team begin their work. He hadn't spoken since the car was found, only occasionally jotting notes in his worn brown notebook. The car door was unlocked. McCarthy, the young officer, put on rubber gloves and opened it with a thin cloth. The door creaked open, hinges squeaking coldly. The air inside carried a mix of gas, wet fabric, and something faintly sweet, mingled with the stale smell of old upholstery. On the driver's seat, a dark brown leather purse sat neatly, its flap open, revealing a wallet, some loose change, a lipstick, and a broken-tooth plastic comb. No signs of rummaging. The driver's seat was reclined far back, as if someone had leaned back and never returned it. The passenger window was cracked open a few inches, dew clinging to its edge. A single white canvas shoe lay on the floor, turned sideways, its heel caked in red mud. On the passenger seat, a small leather strap watch with a round silver face stopped at 10:41. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no stray hairs, just the sense of everything frozen mid-moment, like a film paused halfway through an unfinished line. Dillard stood outside, silently taking in the scene, a familiar chill rising in him, known only to those long in the job. When things look too tidy, it's usually because someone cleaned them up. He signaled the team to photograph the scene. The camera's mechanical clicks cut through the damp air. Another tech measured the distance from the front tire to the bridge's edge, marking numbers in white chalk on the road. McCarthy crouched, shining his flashlight under the chassis. "No tears or impact marks, sir," he said. "No drag marks either." Dillard nodded faintly, saying nothing, then moved to the car's rear. On the dusty paint, faint handprints smudged, too blurred to identify. He leaned down, inspecting the license plate, touching its cold metal edge. This car was a familiar sight in town, known as the Hartmans. Now it sat here, silent, like evidence of something no one wanted to believe. A tech called out, "Found a fiber on the seat, sir." He used metal tweezers to lift a small gray-blue thread. Dillard leaned in, the seat's brown vinyl. "That fiber doesn't belong," he said, motioning for an evidence bag. The thread was sealed in a small plastic pouch, labeled E1. They also collected a sample of wet red mud near the right tire, sandy, like the soil 2 miles south of the lake. If that's right, Dillard thought. Someone crossed the south shore before coming here. As the team worked, He stepped back, scanning the area. The old bridge was nearly deserted, surrounded by pines and reeds. No cameras, no streetlights. 10 years ago, it was a teen hangout, but after a fatal accident, few came by. Dillard looked at the lake, sunlight glaring off it, forcing him to squint. Beneath that silver sheen, Lake Lucas was unnaturally still, as if hiding something. He heard insects buzzing, wind through the trees, the scratch of a text pen, all blending into an eerie, steady tension. McCarthy approached, holding his notebook. No fresh footprints around the area. Just some old boot marks, maybe from fishermen. Dillard stayed silent, eyes on the car. "There's something here," he said slowly. "It just doesn't want to be seen." He circled to the other side of the bridge, crouching close to the road. Under thin fog, faint parallel skid marks ran, like from small auxiliary tires, stopping abruptly at the railing. He touched the iron railing, feeling its cold, wet rust. A dewdrop fell from its edge, rippling the lake below. Turning back, he saw the yellow car still there, almost serene. But to Dillard, it felt more unsettling. He jotted in his notebook, "Car parked by bridge, door unlocked. Purse, wallet, watch, intact. No signs of voluntary departure, possible interference." His pen wavered slightly, mirroring his feeling. A thin line between professional reason and human instinct. As the sun rose higher, the team packed up, the scene cordoned with yellow tape. Locals gathered at the bridge's end, watching silently, some whispering before falling quiet as Dillard passed. He nodded curtly, eyes forward. Another officer asked softly, "Sir, could she have just left with someone?" Dillard didn't answer immediately. He glanced back, the car gleaming as if dissolving into the fog, the scene so calm he could hear the yellow tape fluttering in the breeze. Finally, he said quietly, "If so, that someone didn't plan on her coming back." That afternoon, as the yellow tape came down and the car was towed to the impound lot, Asheboro fell into an odd silence. Rumors spread faster than news. At the barber shop, the grocery store, even the evening church service, people whispered about the girl who vanished by Lake Lucas, a place now left to old fishermen and kids catching frogs. Sheriff Tommy Dillard spent the next day circling the lake. He didn't want to rely on his team's notes. He needed to hear what locals saw and felt firsthand. The lake road was narrow, lined with green moss and fallen pine needles. The first house he visited belonged to Wallace, an old fisherman in a weathered wooden cabin a few hundred yards from the bridge. He greeted Dillard on the porch, holding a steaming coffee mug, eyes squinting in the sunlight. "That night, I heard a truck," Wallace said, voice rough as gravel. "Around 5:30, maybe near 6 in the morning, I was changing bait. Engine roared, then cut off, clear as day by the bridge. Then a car door slammed hard. After that, nothing." Dillard noted it carefully. "Did you see the vehicle?" Wallace shook his head. "Couldn't make it out. Fog was too thick. But I remember a light flashing across the water, like headlights reflecting." Next, Dillard stopped at a small house deep in the woods west of the lake, home to Laverne Cross, an elderly widow living alone with her tabby cat. She opened the door slowly, pale eyes studying Dillard with faint suspicion. "I know you're here about that girl," she said before he could introduce himself. "I couldn't sleep that night. Felt like something was happening out there." Dillard asked her to sit, opening his notebook. "Can you tell me exactly what you heard or saw?" Laverne spoke slowly. "Around nearly 5 in the morning, I was making tea when I saw a pale green light on the bridge railing through the window. Looked like a truck's headlights, the big kind. The light was odd, like it was fogged over. It stayed still for a while, then went out. After that, complete silence. No voices, no engine. Just my cat hissing, fur standing up. I knew something wasn't right." Dillard asked, "Did you see anyone or hear any screams?" She shook her head, hands trembling slightly. "No, just the light, and something moving slowly below. I didn't dare open the door." Dillard scanned the room, sunlight filtering through curtains, dust floating in the beams. He wrote her account, closed the notebook, thanked her, and stood. As he left, Laverne called softly, "Officer, do you think that girl's still alive?" Dillard didn't turn, only replied quietly, "I don't know yet, but I'll find out what happened." By noon, he continued along the lake, visiting scattered homes of locals familiar with the wind's sound and the water's damp smell. Everyone mentioned hearing something, but no one was sure if it was real. An engine starting then stopping, a door slamming, or just echoes from across the lake. Some claimed to see a figure by the bridge, others swore it was just a broken lamppost reflecting light. The accounts were fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror that wouldn't fit together. By afternoon, Dillard returned to the station. He spread his notes across the desk, dozens of tiny details like glittering, meaningless dust. McCarthy walked in, holding a newspaper. "Morning edition, sir." Dillard took it, reading the bold headline on the Randolph County Ledger's front page, "17-year-old girl vanishes after shift." Below was a photo of Emily Hartman, her smile radiant in her school uniform. Dillard stared at it, a bitter ache spreading. To the press, it was a sensational story in a quiet summer. To him, it was the start of something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. That evening, Dillard held a brief meeting with the team. "I want everyone around the lake questioned again, thoroughly. Find out who owns a large truck, one with green or dim lights," he said, voice rough. McCarthy asked, "Sir, you think it's a kidnapping?" Dillard paused, looking out the window at the red-streaked sky. Lake Lucas glowed in the distance, its sunset sheen like spreading blood. "I don't think," he said slowly. "I know." That night, lake winds carried damp air and the thick smell of algae into town. In small diners, people began sharing stories, each with their own version. Some said Emily was pulled into the lake. Others claimed she ran off with an old boyfriend. One swore they saw a green truck lurking 3 nights straight before she vanished. Dillard overheard these in the supermarket, the coffee shop, the church hallway, and he knew, when rumors start, the truth slips further away. That night, he sat alone in his office, the newspaper still open on his desk. Outside, streetlights cast a dim glow on the window, stretching his shadow long. He wrote his first memo to the State Bureau, requesting technical support. The report's final line, written in firm strokes: "No signs of voluntary departure, possible interference. Victim missing near Lake Lucas, status unknown." As he set down his pen, the wall clock struck 11. The town slept, but outside, the lake's breeze passed through every roof, carrying nameless whispers. People talked, but no one had answers. 3 days after the yellow car was towed from the bridge, Lake Lucas became a silent work site. Small dive boats dotted the water, sonar machines clicking in the morning fog, while police taped off sections along the shore. The disappearance wasn't just in the Randolph County Ledger anymore. Local stations began broadcasting, TV cameras appearing outside the cordoned area, their white lights glaring on the murky lake. Dillard disliked it. He knew the more cameras, the harder it was to hear what the scene was saying. He stood on the bridge, watching the dive team lower equipment into the water. The lake's surface was still, coated with a thin algae film, sunlight casting an odd green sheen. Boat engines and electronic beeps pulsed steadily, like a giant's heartbeat. McCarthy held a radio, eyes on a portable sonar screen on the boat. No large objects in the deep layers, just some rocks and sunken branches, he reported. Dillard nodded slightly, saying nothing. He knew the odds of finding her underwater were slim, but every possibility had to be ruled out. On the shore, another team waded through mud along the north bank. They moved slowly, eyes fixed on every dent in the soil. The sun climbed, its reflection on the water forcing squints. A shout rang out, "Sir, something here." Dillard turned, striding through waist-high reeds. A young officer stood by the water's edge, holding a plastic bag with a white object inside. It was a canvas shoe, identical to the one found in Emily's car. The fabric was soaked, the sole caked in red mud. "How far from the bridge?" Dillard asked. "About half a mile, sir, north shore." He nodded, signaling to seal the evidence. Nearby, the ground showed unusual depressions. Dillard crouched, measuring the distance between two deep ruts in the mud with a metal ruler. 58 inches, large tires, he muttered. He shone his flashlight, revealing square-patterned tread marks, evenly spaced and deep. McCarthy knelt beside him, flipping through a tire pattern guide. This matches Ford F-100 trucks, late 70s models. Dillard stayed silent, tracing the tracks from the shore to a dirt road behind. Not a civilian vehicle, old truck, the kind only a few locals still keep. They marked the area, took photos, and strung tape to measure the path. The tire tracks stretched about 20 meters before vanishing on a stretch of hard gravel. But to Dillard, that was enough. Whoever it was knew this route, he said, voice low. Knew the North Shore has little traffic, few houses, and you can leave the scene without being seen. McCarthy jotted it down quickly, then asked, Sir, do you think he brought the girl here, or left from here? Dillard looked at the lake, its reflected light cold and deep in his eyes. Both, he replied curtly. That afternoon, the dive team continued sonar sweeps about 20 meters off the North Shore. The screen showed strange, faint shadows, like small hollows in the lakebed mud. They dropped anchor, lowered a dragnet, and pulled up debris, a rusted soda can, scraps of fabric, and a corroded keychain. Dillard inspected them, no markings tied to Emily. But what caught his attention was the dark red mud on the keychain, identical to the soil where the shoe was found. It meant that, wherever the girl was that night, the car or someone had passed through this exact area. On the shore, forensic techs collected soil samples, comparing them to the mud on Emily's tires. Preliminary results matched. Dillard stood on a hill, noting in his book, Ford F-100 tire tracks. North Shore location, victim's shoe found nearby. Need to verify who owns this type of vehicle in the area. He knew the list would be short. Asabro had only a few people with old trucks like that, farmers, carpenters, and a handful of construction workers around the lake. Late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Dillard lingered. He stood watching the lake darken, its surface streaked red like diluted blood. A light breeze made the yellow tape around the area flutter, snapping softly. In that moment, he recalled the pale green light Laverne mentioned, the strange glow on the bridge railing. It could have been from an old Ford's headlights, or maybe not. But if it was, the driver was here that night, and likely knew exactly what they were doing. Back at the station, Dillard and McCarthy spread the crime scene photos across the table, the white shoe, tire tracks, mud impressions, and a map marking the area. On a corkboard, he pinned a photo of the Lucas Bridge at the center, drawing red strings to nearby locations. Each string was a possibility, a question unanswered. McCarthy asked, Sir, are we considering this could be a stranger passing through town? Dillard shook his head. No. A stranger wouldn't know the North Shore Trail, wouldn't know the soft ground that doesn't flood. It's someone who's been here many times. 2 days after finding the tire tracks and shoe on the North Shore, the Ashboro police station's interrogation room stayed open all night. The air was thick with coffee and cigarette smoke, the kind of mix only found in cases everyone knew would drag on longer than they hoped. Dillard sat at the head of the table, twirling a ballpoint pen between his fingers, staring at Emily's photo on the wall. Her smile, simple and bright, made the cold room feel more painful. The first person brought in was Mark Talbot, Emily's ex-boyfriend, an 18-year-old with a high haircut and nervous eyes. He walked in, hands deep in his jacket pockets, nodding slightly at Dillard. We just need to confirm a few details, Dillard began, voice calm. You were the last one to talk to her on the phone, right? Mark nodded. Around 8, that night, she said she'd just finished her shift at the clinic and was heading home. I asked if she wanted to grab food, but she said we'd meet tomorrow since she had to be up early. He looked down, voice fading. She wasn't mad at me. We broke up on good terms. Dillard scribbled a few lines, then asked, Where were you that night? At my uncle's place, 7 miles from here. I slept over. Can anyone confirm that? Yeah, my uncle and his wife. I was there from 9 p.m. till morning. McCarthy checked the duty log from the local precinct. At that time, Mark was seen at his uncle's, who'd called to report a dog theft nearby, and Mark had spoken to an officer over the phone. Alibi solid. Dillard knew if there was anything suspicious, this lanky kid wasn't the type to pull it off. He was just a figure already faded from Emily's life. As Mark left, Dillard stood by the window, watching him go, his eyes on the parking lot where dusk cast shadows. He felt a familiar hollowness, the kind when a lead flickers out. His mind kept circling the shoe, the tire tracks, the deserted lake shore. Something was here, he thought, just hiding in someone's memory. That evening, during a team briefing, as Dillard said they were out of leads, Claire Hartman, Emily's mother, came to the station. She'd visibly lost weight, her eyes red from sleeplessness, her voice hoarse as she recounted details. Who was Emily closest to, besides Mark? Dillard asked. She paused, hands clutching her sweater's hem. There was Earl, she said softly. Her brother-in-law, my sister's husband. He used to drive her to work since they worked nearby. Dillard looked up. Same direction? North, past Lake Lucas. Her words froze him for a moment. Where does he work? At Randall's lumber yard, out on the town's edge. Night shifts. McCarthy scribbled the name. Dillard pressed. When did you last see him? The night before she disappeared. He stopped by, said he'd lend her his truck if her car broke down. I remember Emily laughing, saying, "No need, my car's fine." She fell silent, then added, "She trusted him. We all did." Dillard leaned back, thinking, Earl Simmons, 32, lumberyard worker, no record in town over a decade. The kind of man people called reliable, church-going, soft-spoken, good at putting others at ease. But Dillard had met men like that before. They always had a side no one saw. The next morning, Dillard and McCarthy went to Randall's lumberyard. Earl Simmons stood by a saw, work shirt dusted with sawdust, smiling as they approached. Something wrong, sir. We need to ask about last Friday night. Earl wiped his brow, voice easy. Oh, about Emily. Heard about it. Poor thing. His tone was so sincere, McCarthy almost bought it. Dillard opened his notebook. Where were you that night? Working the night shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Anyone confirm that? The whole crew. I worked with 5 others. Ask them. Dillard scanned the quiet yard, only the steady buzz of saws in the air. We will, he said, closing the notebook. They left, and McCarthy said quietly in the car. He seems honest, sir, Bull said. Dillard didn't reply. He stared out the window, sunlight glinting off the dusty road. Earl's words echoed. I worked the night shift. Short, natural, too smooth. Have you checked the timesheet? Not yet, but I will. Do it now. McCarthy nodded, turning onto the main road. That afternoon, the report confirmed, Earl Simmons was logged at the lumberyard that night, but the timesheet was handwritten, no supervisor's signature, just a single blue ink line. Shift 3, different from the pens used by others that night. Dillard reviewed the copy, tapping the paper lightly. Everyone's honest until someone checks. He set it down, eyes heavy. Late that night, with the station quiet, Dillard stood before the corkboard. Red strings linked Earl Simmons to the Lucas Bridge, then to the White Shoes photo. A silent, clear line, but not enough evidence. He stared at it, as if the silence could speak. Then he pulled out his pen, writing in his notebook. Earl Simmons' victim's brother-in-law. Owns Ford, F-100, claims night shift. Unverified independently. He leaned back, eyes closed, hearing the wall clock tick like a heartbeat. Images overlapped in his mind. Lake Lucas, the pale green light, tire tracks, the white shoe, and the girl's smile in the photo. He didn't know if he was seeing coincidence or the answer itself. Dillard set the name aside, not yet realizing it was the only lead he'd ever had. 2 months passed since Emily Hartman vanished. Summer had faded from Ashboro, leaving foggy mornings and the faint smell of dry pine. Lake Lucas was still again, its surface like smooth glass. The yellow tape around the bridge was gone, only faint white paint marks on the road, hinting something happened there. But in the Ashboro police files, The red-lettered case, 80 Lucas, remained top priority, until every search and interview hit a dead end. Dillard sat in his office, staring at the thick file stack. On the case's temporary cover, his black ink handwriting was still clear. Emily Hartman, female, 17, missing after shift, July 17, 1980. Below were reports, witness lists, soil analysis, photos of the shoe, tire tracks, and a note about Earl Simmons, a name he'd crossed out and rewritten 3 times. No evidence, no new witnesses, nothing to hold him. Everything stopped there, like the yellow car by the bridge. The press, once fixated, moved on. The Randolph County Ledger's headline, 17-year-old girl vanishes after shift, gave way to fall fair coverage, then a small wildfire outside town. Life in Ashboro resumed, except for the Hartmans. They left one September morning, unannounced, with no memorial. Claire quietly packed, removing Emily's photos from the walls, while Robert loaded their old truck, never seen crying. They headed to Arkansas, to distant relatives, telling neighbors, "We need to start over somewhere else." Their small house on the town's edge left a cold void, its windows shut through that winter. Dillard didn't see them off. He stood at his office window, watching their truck pass the town square and disappear around a bend. He felt both relief and weight. Relief that, on paper, the case had followed procedure. Weight because he knew something had slipped through his grasp that shouldn't have. The file was reviewed one last time in late September. In a meeting with the state police, Dillard reported, no new physical evidence, no additional witnesses. The 12-page report ended with a dry line. Case status: unresolved disappearance. File officially closed. That evening, he stayed in his office alone. The room was quiet, only the old air conditioner's hum breaking the silence. He pulled a photo of the Lucas Bridge from his desk drawer, taken the morning after finding Emily's car. Faint light coated the lake, reflecting the rusted railing. Dillard stared at it, then placed it among the file's pages before clipping it shut and locking it in the steel cabinet. The cabinet's door closed with a heavy clang, like the end of an unkept promise. He took out his small notebook, opening to the case's final page. His usually firm, neat handwriting faltered in the last line. No further leads, no conclusion. But what's missing isn't in the file. He closed the notebook, tucking it away. Outside, night wind passed through the eaves, carrying Lake Lucas's chill, slipping through the door's cracks, rustling papers on his desk. McCarthy knocked, entering with 2 coffee cups. "Still here, sir?" "Yeah," Dillard replied, eyes on the cabinet. McCarthy paused, then said softly, "Maybe she just left. Sometimes people want to disappear." Dillard turned, his gaze darkening. "No one disappears like that, McCarthy. Not in this town, not that girl." Then he gave a faint smile, patting his deputy's shoulder. "But fine. Sometimes closing a file is how we move on to other work." McCarthy nodded, leaving. Dillard stayed, sitting, looking out at the night sky. In the distance, moonlight faintly reflected on the lake. He pictured the yellow car, its weak headlights, and a shadowy figure by the railing. The image flickered, fading like a memory he didn't want to keep but couldn't forget. The next morning, at the station, Emily Hartman's file rested in the steel cabinet, labeled #214. The heavy gray cabinet held hundreds of cases, thefts, assaults, disappearances, but only one made Dillard pause when he passed: Lucas' case. He didn't know if it was professional habit or obsession. Time passed, and the young girl's disappearance became a whispered tale in coffee shops. Stories varied. Some said she ran away. Others claimed the lake took her. A few mentioned the green light as an omen. No one believed the police would find the truth. But for Dillard, the case never truly closed. It lay silent in the cold steel cabinet, like a door not yet opened. Right. He didn't know that, years later, this file, with its yellowed photos, old fabric, and quiet notes, would return, defining the rest of his life. But in that fall of 1980, with cold wind through the window and stale coffee, all he could do was lock the cabinet and tell himself, not every case has an ending. 5 years passed since Emily Hartman's file was stored in the steel cabinet. Hasbro had changed. A new supermarket rose in the town center. The old gas station on Route 64 was demolished, and only a few aging households remained near Lake Lucas. The lake stayed the same, cold, deep, silent. Emily's name was rarely mentioned, only brought up by older folks during campfires, more a cautionary tale than real pain. Dillard, now deputy sheriff, seldom spoke of it. But when opening the old file cabinet, his eyes lingered on #214, Lucas case, before moving on as if he hadn't seen it. On a fall morning in 1985, with fog still cloaking the lake, a patrol officer named Jerry Wallace was tasked with checking the forest along the lake's east shore. It was undeveloped land, with a narrow trail winding deep into old pines, where locals dumped construction debris. Jerry walked alone, notebook in hand, boots soaked from dew. Wind swayed the trees, the air sharp with pine resin. As he crouched to write near the forest's edge, his eyes caught a small object tangled in thorns, a tattered beige cloth, caked in red dirt. Jerry picked it up, brushing it lightly. Under the dried mud, crude embroidered stitches, nearly faded, spelled E.H. He froze for a moment. Those initials stirred a memory of the name the town once whispered, Emily Hartman. Jerry stood still in the damp forest, heart pounding. It could be coincidence, but it might also be something no one thought still existed. He placed the cloth in a plastic bag, marked the coordinates, and radioed the station. By noon, Dillard was at the scene. His hair now flecked with gray, his movements slower, but his eyes still sharp. When Jerry handed him the bag, Dillard stayed silent for a long time. "You sure you found it here?" "Yes, right at the forest's edge, near old tire tracks." Dillard opened the bag, lifting the cloth with a pen. The sparse threads glinted in the sunlight. The damp earth smelled strong. "E.H.E. read softly, his breath heavy with doubt and weight. They searched the area half a day, digging lightly, scanning with metal detectors, checking every bush, nothing else but broken glass and rusted bottle caps. Dillard ordered the cloth sealed as evidence. Back then, fiber analysis was basic. The station's lab had only an old microscope and a few comparison samples. "We can identify the fabric type," a tech said. But nothing more. No blood, no DNA, no skin cells. Dillard nodded, knowing, like so many times before, hope flickered and died in his hands. The evidence was wrapped in craft paper, sealed and labeled. Evidence E19. Cloth with embroidered EH. Found September 12, 1985. East shore of Lake Lucas. He signed it and personally carried it to the storage vault in the station's basement. The dim room smelled of paper, dust, and metal, with hundreds of case files stacked high. Dillard placed the small envelope in the case's inactive 1980-1985 section, wedged between two other cases. As he closed the cabinet, the metal clanged, echoing faintly in the space. On his way back, Dillard stopped by the lake. Afternoon wind rippled the water's surface. He recalled the pale green light on the railing, the tire tracks in mud, the white shoe, and the mother's voice that night. It felt like yesterday, yet so distant no one believed it was real anymore. He pulled a small paper from his notebook, adding a line, "Cloth with EH. Possibly victims. Stored pending testing. Case still open, though no one's waiting." Time moved on. Jerry Wallace transferred to another county. New officers knew nothing of the 1980 disappearance. The Lucas case file lay quiet in the basement's dark, occasionally checked, then returned to its place. On the envelope, EH faded with the year. 10 years later, in the winter of 1990, the Ashboro Police Station's storage vault was opened for the first time since the station relocated. A team of young officers was tasked with reviewing old files for the state's new system. Fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on thick dust. Old boxes, smelling of damp paper and metal, were pulled from shelves. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley, newly promoted from criminal investigations, volunteered to oversee the inventory. A meticulous officer, He read every file to the last line, even long-closed cases. That afternoon, flipping through the inactive 1980-1985 box, he found a thin, worn folder, its edges frayed, labeled in faded blue ink, #214. Lucas case. Hensley frowned. The name stirred a vague familiarity, like something he'd heard as a rookie. He brought the file to the table, brushed off the dust, and opened it. The first page was the case opening report, signed by Sheriff Tommy Dillard at the bottom. The following pages held officers' statements, crime scene photos, interview transcripts, and a few old Randolph County Ledger clippings tucked between. Each sheet was yellowed, but the handwritten notes remained clear. Hensley read from the start, his eyes lingering on small details: the white shoe, the Ford F-100 tire tracks, the EH embroidered cloth found in 1985. Midway through the file, he noticed an odd gap. Among the consecutively numbered interview reports, page 37, interview report, Earl Simmons was torn out. The tear was obvious, with a few paper fibers still clinging to the edge. Hensley frowned, checking the index. There, in black ink, was a handwritten note. Earl Simmons, Interview 1, July 24, 1980. No following page, no audio record, no appendix. Just a blank space and a small folded paper clipped to the back. He opened it, finding scrawled words, not in Dillard's handwriting, but likely from an assisting scribe, the last person to see her. Those 4 words stopped him cold. Hensley set the paper down, silent for a moment. If Earl Simmons was the last person to see her, why was the report torn out, and why no follow-up interview? In other files, he'd never seen such an oversight. Dillard was known for precision, never missing key documents. Only 2 possibilities: either an administrative error lost the page, or someone deliberately removed it. He leaned back, staring at the flickering fluorescent ceiling light. Something about this case wouldn't let him stop. Hensley took the note, photocopied it in the archive room, and marked the missing page in the inventory log. He knew he should just finish sorting, but an old investigator's instinct, the kind every homicide cop understood, pushed him something here hadn't been fully told. That evening, with the others gone, Hensley stayed alone. He reopened the file, spreading each page on the table in chronological order. The night of the disappearance, the car's discovery, forensic results, Mark Talbot's interview, then the family contacts list. At the list's end, Earl Simmons appeared again under family contacts. A note beside it read, "Victim's sister's husband, works at Randall's lumberyard, no suspicion marked, no red person of interest flag, just a name slipping through the file like any other." Hensley pulled out his small notebook, jotting a few lines. Hartman, Emily. Missing July 17, 1980. Evidence: car, shoe, tire tracks, EH cloth. Earl Simmons interview missing. Note the last person to see her, verify evidence storage status. Then he closed the notebook, tucking it away. The next day, Hensley went to the basement evidence vault. The clerk, a heavy-set man named Howard, flipped through the log for code E19. He pulled out an old cardboard box, carefully breaking the seal. Inside were craft paper envelopes, one clearly labeled E19, embroidered EH cloth, east shore of Lake Lucas. Howard said, "No one's touched this since the vault moved." "Want me to open it?" Hensley shook his head. "Not yet. I just need to know it's here." He stared at the envelope, feeling like he was seeing a voice from the past, still intact. That evening, Hensley drove around Lake Lucas. January's moon hung low, casting silver light on the still water. He stopped at the Lucas Bridge, where the yellow car was once found. The rusted railing and cracked concrete pillars still bore faint white paint marks from Dillard's old notations. Cold wind rustled his jacket. Underfoot, gravel crunched, much like the sound he imagined from the night Emily vanished. In that moment, Hensley knew he'd stepped onto a path many officers avoided, tracing backward through time, following the tracks of those who disappeared and those who stopped looking. He knew he couldn't reopen the case without authority, But he also knew if he didn't act, no one would ever care about those 4 words. The last person to see her. Back home, he opened his notebook, writing one final line. Sometimes, a case doesn't go cold, it just waits for someone else to touch it. Then he turned off the light. In the dark, the letters E8 glowed in his memory, reminding him that somewhere, amid the yellowed pages, a truth was still waiting to be named. In the summer of 2018, Asheboro was far different from the 1980s. The dirt roads around Lake Lucas were paved. Randall's lumber yard was now an electronics warehouse, and the old bridge, once a line between memory and oblivion, had deteriorated into a public hazard. The county ordered its demolition for a new one. On June 19th, workers began, bringing excavators and cranes, the clang of metal on concrete echoing across the lake. None knew that, under the thick red mud by the bridge's foundation, a piece of the past waited to surface. That morning, a worker named Rick Miller was digging near the water's edge when the excavator's scoop hit something hard. He shut off the machine, bending to check. Amid wet mud and concrete fragments, a small glinting object caught the sunlight. Rick brushed it off, revealing a thin silver bracelet, tarnished, with EH etched inside. He hesitated, then slipped it into his reflective vest's pocket, planning to have his wife polish it. But at the work camp, he recalled a childhood story, his father's tale of the girl lost at Lake Lucas. The letters EH chilled him. Rick called the Asheboro police, voice shaking. "I think we found something, maybe tied to that 1980 case." 30 minutes later, 2 police cars and a forensic van arrived. The bridge area was immediately cordoned off. The new investigation team, led by Lieutenant Marvin Hensley, now a veteran nearing retirement, was first on scene. Hearing from bracelet over the radio, Hensley nearly stopped breathing. 38 years after Emily Hartman vanished, he still recalled every letter of that old note from 1990. The mix of excitement, doubt, and fear he was dreaming made his heart race. Hensley stepped from his car, lake wind tousling his gray hair. He looked at the muddy pile under the bridge's foundation, exactly where, per old maps, the yellow car had stopped. "This is where it began," he said softly, almost to himself. The tech showed him the evidence bag with the new find, the silver bracelet, rinsed with clean water. Though tarnished, the inner etching was clear. "It's real," Hensley said, voice faltering. He ordered the evidence sent to North Carolina's state lab in Raleigh. 3 days later, results came back. The silver matched the alloy of jewelry sold at Carolina Jewelers in the late 1970s. Sales records confirmed on June 12, 1979. A silver bracelet with EH was bought by Claire Hartman, Emily's mother. The tiny dots after the E and H in the hand-etched letters matched perfectly. It couldn't be coincidence. News spread fast. The next morning, the Asheboro Daily News led with a bold headline, "Silver Bracelet Awakens Past, Emily Hartman Case May Be Reopened." Local TV crews flocked to the scene. The Lucas Bridge, forgotten for decades, was now ablaze with camera lights. Locals crowded the shore, staring at the mud as if history might rise from it. An elderly woman, trembling, told a reporter, "I went to school with Emily. God, I never thought we'd hear her name again." At Randolph County's police headquarters, Hensley sat in a meeting room, facing investigators 30 years his junior. He recounted the case, the 1980 report, the shoe, tire tracks, the 1985 EH cloth, and the torn-out interview page. Each line he read pulled them back to a time when files were handwritten and instinct trumped digital forensics. "What do we have besides the bracelet?" an investigator asked. Hensley replied, "Not just the bracelet. The 1985 embroidered cloth has identical initials, both found decades apart, but in the same bridge area. That means the perpetrator returned at least once, or something of the victims drifted from the original spot." He paused, scanning the room. "Either way, we'll find out." The order to reopen Emily Hartman's case was signed that day. Val #214 Lucas case was pulled from storage, dusty evidence bags opened under cold white lights. Each envelope was resealed, digitally photographed, and QR-coded per new state rules. Forensics placed the new silver bracelet beside the old cloth, two pieces of evidence side by side, like twin messages from the past. That afternoon, Hensley returned to Lake Lucas. The old bridge was mostly gone, only a jagged concrete pillar jutting from the water. The lake's surface was still, reflecting blinding gold sunlight. He stood on the shore, eyes tracing the water, picturing Emily driving her yellow car, headlights hitting the railing, then vanishing into fog. The construction noise faded, only the wind remained, like the sound he'd heard described years ago. In his hand, he held his notebook, writing a new line. His script shaky but firm, silver bracelet with EH, found under Lucas Bridge, confirmed victim Emily Hartman's. Case reopened under Special Investigation Protocol. Lead, Lieutenant Marvin Hensley. In the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation's Forensics Lab in Raleigh, the old Lucas case evidence bags were laid on a stainless steel table under cold white lights. Outside, July 2018's morning sun blazed, but inside, the room felt neither warm nor alive, as if time had stopped. Chief Technician Dr. Alana Ruiz opened the sealed box coded E19, the 1985 embroidered cloth. The yellowed craft paper seal, with Dillard's faded signature, was still intact. Ruiz used a specialized knife to cut the edge, carefully lifting the cloth onto a glass tray. The old stitches were frayed, but the fabric held its structure. Beside it, an assistant opened evidence bag E7, collected from the driver's seat of Emily's yellow car in 1980. Inside was a dark brown felt fiber, once marked source unknown. Hensley stood behind the observation glass, watching them work. A strange feeling hit him, familiar yet uneasy. For nearly 40 years he'd read and memorized every line in the file, but this was his first time seeing the actual evidence Dillard once touched. As Ruiz placed the cloth under an electron microscope, the screen showed interwoven threads, fine as silk, glinting faintly. She adjusted magnification, then compared it with the E7 sample. Two images appeared side by side, one thread thin, the other thicker, both reddish-brown. Ruiz frowned, typing commands to analyze fiber structure. Both are synthetic felt, made from the same industrial polyester common in the late 1970s, she said, voice steady. But look at the thread twist. They're not standard car upholstery. This is material typical of leather felt blend seats used in old Ford trucks. The room fell dead silent. A young technician looked up, asking, "Which model, doctor?" Ruiz pulled a sample from Ford's upholstery database, preserved by Restoration Archives. When the 1977-1979 Ford F100 seat sample appeared, its color and structure matched perfectly. "I want to confirm again," she said, "but preliminary findings suggest the fiber in the victim's car matches the seat of a Ford F100, the truck Earl Simmons owned." Hensley took a sharp breath, gripping his notebook. In his mind, Dillard's old report flashed, tire tracks, Ford F100. Family contact, Earl Simmons, owned same model. Back then, it was dismissed as coincidence. Now, 40 years later, that coincidence tightened like a noose. Ruiz continued, using spectrometry to compare paint and adhesive traces in the samples. The screen showed near-identical spectral lines. "This isn't just the same material type," she said, voice lower. "This fiber likely came from the same Ford F100 seat that touched the upholstery in the victim's car." Her words sent a chill down Hensley's spine. He heard a past warning echo. If someone was waiting for her, they waited in the right place. The preliminary report was finished that afternoon. The thin document carried enough weight to make Hensley's hand feel heavy. In the conclusion, Ruiz wrote clearly, "Evidence analysis results. Felt fiber from victim's car seat matches structure and composition of Ford F100 seat fabric. Embroidered cloth contains synthetic fibers from the same industrial polyester group, compatible with Ford F100 truck seat material. High likelihood evidence was in direct contact within the same physical space." Hensley set the report on the table, looking out the window. Outside, rain began to fall. The steady patter on the glass reminded him of the night he first read Emily's file in the old basement. Rain then too, and the same feeling. Something demanding to be heard. The next day, he met with the special investigation team. Hensley laid out report copies before each member. "Everything points to one place," he said, voice slow but clear. "We have Ford F-100 tire tracks, matching truck seat fibers, and the only suspect who owned that truck within 10 miles of the lake. His name is Earl Simmons." A young officer flipped through a digital file saying, "He's alive, 69 years old. Still in Ashboro, lives alone. Retired from Randall's lumber yard in 2002. The room went quiet. Hensley nodded, his gaze heavy. "We'll verify DNA samples, but first, rebuild the entire timeline. I want to know where he was every minute of July 17, 1980. As the meeting ended, Hensley stayed alone. He looked at the open envelope with the forensic report copy. The light hit the italicized final line. Preliminary conclusion: evidence may directly link to suspect initially ruled out. 10 days after the report's release, the special investigation team began reconstructing Emily Hartman's final journey. The fateful drive of that 1980 summer night. That morning, Ashboro's skies were cloudy, a thin fog draping Lake Lucas. Nearly 4 decades had passed, but the lake's surroundings were almost unchanged. Old pines still cast shadows on the water. The narrow dirt road wound from the south residential area to the now replaced bridge, and in the distance stood weathered wooden houses, one once home to Earl Simmons. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley stood by the roadside, beside a large map printed from 1979 traffic records. The ink had faded, with small roads unnamed, marked only by internal codes. He pointed to a thin line curving around the lake. "This was Emily's route," he said. From the vet clinic on Hillcrest, she turned right onto Route 64 Spur, drove through the pine forest, crossed the Lucas Bridge, then took Road 7 home. No other path existed in 1980. A terrain technician set up GPS on a recreated vehicle, an old yellow sedan matching Emily's model. Using the Hartman family's registered Eagle Summit specs, they restored every detail: headlights, leather seats, scratches on the gearshift, even an old cassette playing "Take It to the Limit" by the Eagles. When the engine started, its rough rumble echoed across the lake, sending a shiver through everyone. "We'll retrace the exact route, exact time," Hensley instructed. From 10 p.m. to 10:30, the window when she left work, until no one heard from her again. He checked his watch, nodding. The yellow car started moving slowly, tires grinding over red dirt, mixed with gravel, kicking up faint dust in the afternoon sun. Hensley and 2 other officers monitored via GPS screens, noting every potential stop. From the clinic to the lake was just over 6 miles, but the terrain was winding and dense. As the car passed the second turn, the road narrowed, flanked by thick trees. "She'd have turned on her headlights here," Hensley said, pointing at the map. "No moon that night. If someone was watching, they could have turned off their lights, stood in the dark, and she'd see nothing." An officer nodded, jotting notes. "And the next stretch leads straight to the Lucas Bridge." When the car reached the bridge, Hensley called for a stop. The new concrete bridge was sturdy, but the old foundation, mossy stones and rusted iron railings, blended into the grass. He stepped out, scanning the area. To the right was a narrow trail into a small forest, the path to Earl Simmons' backyard. "It's just over 300 meters from here to his house," he said quietly. Someone on foot could hear a car stop, see its lights, and step out at the right moment. The team fell silent. The only sound was water lapping gently against the bridge pillars. Hensley stood for a long time, eyes on the lake. In his mind he saw the yellow car stopping here, headlights hitting the railing, reflecting on the water, then going dark. He pictured Emily rolling down her window, hearing footsteps approach. A familiar voice, maybe one that didn't scare her. Perhaps the voice of the brother-in-law she called Uncle Earl. And maybe that moment was where her world ended. To test this, the tech team built a 3D light model simulating July 1980's condition. On the laptop screen, the yellow car appeared in darkness, headlights reflecting off the steel railing, creating the pale green glow Laverne Cross described. When a figure was simulated, stepping from the tree line, light bounced off the yellow car in flickering streaks. "That's the light she saw," Hensley said, voice hoarse. "Not fog, it was wet metal reflecting." The pieces began to fit like waiting links. The Ford F-100 tire tracks on the North Shore, the seat fabric matching Earl Simmons' truck and now Emily's route, confirming she had to pass the bridge right by his house. "No other shortcuts existed," Hensley said, looking around. "Everything points one way." On a muggy Monday morning in August 2018, the Ashboro Police Department's duty phone rang. A hoarse, trembling but clear female voice came through. I might have something about the girl who went missing in 1980. My name is Laverne Cross." The desk officer jotted details and patched the call to Lieutenant Marvin Hensley's office. He sat up at her first words, as if hearing an echo from memory. "Can you start from the beginning?" he asked. Laverne's voice shook, pausing with sharp breaths, but each word landed like a nail. "I saw the blonde girl. She got into a green pickup truck with a guitar sticker on the back." The words green pickup silenced Hensley for a moment. He signaled the clerk to record, then gently prompted. "You said it was that night?" "That night, it was hot. I remember because I was on my porch before the rain came. I lived near the Lucas Bridge then, south side of the lake, near the old gas station. I saw a yellow car stop in the road, then a green pickup pulled up behind it." Hensley leaned toward the mic. "Are you sure about that detail?" "Oh, a green pickup." "I'm sure, dear. It was big. A bit old, left headlight dimmer than the right. I remember telling my husband, that truck's about to lose a headlight, and on the back, the tailgate had a white guitar sticker peeling at the edge. It was odd, so I never forgot." He swallowed hard. In the 1980 file, no one mentioned that image, but in the discarded evidence log was a note. "Potential suspect vehicle, emerald green Ford F-100, owned by Earl Simmons, temporary registration." Hensley knew exactly what Laverne described. "Do you recall the license plate, ma'am?" "Not fully, but the first two letters were JR. I remember thinking it was someone's name, maybe John or Jack. I wrote it in my old notebook the next morning after reading about the missing girl in the paper." An hour later, Hensley and two officers were at Laverne Cross's small home in South Ashboro, where she lived with her daughter. At 82, her white hair and trembling hands contrasted with her sharp eyes. On the living room table sat a cold teacup and a worn brown notebook. She opened to a middle page, her thin finger pointing to faded blue ink. "Green pickup, white guitar, plate JR 421. July 17th night, around 10:20. Lucas Bridge." The room went dead silent. Hensley looked up, meeting her steady, aged eyes. "When did you write this?" "The next morning. I did it because my husband said I imagined things, but when I read about the missing girl, I knew I had to write it down. I thought someone would need it." She paused, giving a sad smile. "I didn't think it'd take nearly 40 years. Hensley studied the handwriting, then turned to a colleague. "Check plate JR 421 in the 1980 vehicle registry." 10 minutes later, the State Archive responded. "Plate JR 421, registered to an emerald green Ford F-100, owner Earl Simmons, 38 Lakeview Road, Asheboro, North Carolina." The room felt airless. Laverne continued, slowly, as if recalling old frames. "I saw the blonde girl step out of the small yellow car, standing by the bridge. She seemed to talk to someone in the pickup. I remember her smiling faintly, then opening the passenger door. After that, the pickup's headlights came on, and it drove north. The small car stayed there, lights on for a bit, then off." She pressed a hand to her chest, voice breaking. "I meant to call the police, but it rained. I thought it was just young folks arguing. The next day, when I saw her picture in the paper, I knew it was her." Hensley bowed his head, thanking her. His voice was rough. "You've given us the missing piece." He asked to photograph the notebook page, then inquired, "Did you ever tell the police before?" Yes, she replied. I called in 1981, but they said the case was closed, and my story wasn't enough. I stayed quiet after that. On the morning of September 3, 2018, a search warrant arrived at Lieutenant Marvin Hensley's office at 7:45. The red Randolph County court seal stood bold in the corner. Search warrant. Residence of Earl Thomas Simmons, 38 Lakeview Road, Asheboro, North Carolina. Hensley stared at the paper, knowing this was the moment he and the team had waited months for. And for him, over half a lifetime. Earl Simmons' house sat deep in an old lot by the pine forest, less than 300 meters from the Lucas Bridge, exactly as mapped in 1980. The single-story wooden house, its paint peeling, had a rusted tin roof and knee-high grass. The porch was dusty, windows shuttered, with a tilted "No Trespassing" sign on a wooden post. Simmons lived alone, no wife or kids, retired for nearly 2 decades. Neighbors rarely saw him, only occasionally at the market in a newer pickup. At 9 a.m., 3 police cars and a forensic van parked at the gate. Hensley stepped out first, with forensic investigator Colby and 2 officers. He read the warrant aloud, then knocked. No answer. After minutes, they broke the lock and entered. Inside smelled of damp mold and machine oil. Dust coated everything. Walls stained, a ceiling patch sagging. On the dining table were old newspapers, dates scattered, mostly about crimes or disappearances. He lives like time stopped, Colby said softly, gloving up and switching on a flashlight. They split up, searching rooms, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, all unremarkable save for old items. But the back shed changed everything. The old metal door creaked open, revealing a small, dark room heavy with gasoline and oil. Shelves held dozens of old cartons labeled tools, spare parts, photos. The last one stopped Hensley. He crouched, opening it. Under wrapped newspapers were dozens of yellowed Polaroids and an old camera. The photos showed forests, the bridge, the lake, and some captured an emerald green Ford F-100 pickup. One photo froze everyone. In it, the pickup was parked by the forest's edge, half its body reflecting dim sunset light. What chilled them on the truck's window? A blonde girl's reflection stood in front, holding something like a small purse. Though faint, her slim frame, light hair, and youthful profile were clear. Hensley felt a shiver. He lifted the photo with gloved fingers, eyes locked on it. "Where was this taken?" he asked softly. Colby used a magnifying glass. "The pines in the back. That's the north side of the Lucas Bridge." No map was needed, Hensley knew. He signaled the tech to bag the evidence, each photo sealed in anti-static bags, numbered sequentially. The team left as the sun peaked. They sent the photo box and Polaroid camera to Raleigh's imaging lab. 2 days later, preliminary results arrived, opening with a line Hensley reread. Polaroid #17 shows a female figure reflected in the truck's window. Bone structure, height, and facial features align with victim Emily Hartman. The lab used color restoration and spectral lighting to enhance the faint reflection. Under adjusted light, the girl's face clarified. Small nose, round chin, low-tied hair, and a thin silver bracelet on her left wrist. Hensley stared at the large screen, silent for a long time. It was the moment imagined for 38 years. Now she appeared, as if standing in the photo taken by her killer. "Why'd Simmons keep this?" Colby asked. Hensley replied slowly, "Some criminals keep their own evidence, not to boast, but to prove to themselves it really happened." They reviewed the photo box, finding more shots in the same forest, one dated at the bottom, July 16, 80, just 1 day before Emily vanished. In it, the green pickup was parked in the same spot, no one present. It suggested a script. Simmons watched, planned, and waited. Wednesday morning, 4 days after the Polaroid analysis, the team returned to Simmons' house for a second search, focusing on the attic, unchecked earlier due to its rotted, dusty ceiling. Hensley stood below watching Colby climb a creaking wooden ladder. The flashlight swept through thick darkness, revealing cobwebs and stacked dusty cartons. "Careful," The floor might be rotten, Hensley warned. Colby called back. Got it. I see boxes labeled audios up here. Rustling sounded, then Colby passed down a small brown wooden box. Its lock rusted, labeled in faded yellow paper. Recordings, 1979, 1981. Hensley gloved up, opening it. Inside were 4 old cassette tapes, labels faded, each marked in shaky ballpoint. July 80 drive, test, voice, E. The room's air grew heavy. E. Colby whispered. Hensley nodded slightly. He ordered the box sealed and sent to Raleigh's audio lab. Everyone knew, if these tapes held Simmons' voice, they could be the case's heaviest evidence. 2 days later, Hensley was in the analysis room. An old tape player, wired to a digital system, played a grainy, distorted sound, the machine's mechanics hissing like breath. Audio tech Grace Nolan adjusted frequencies, filtering noise. From the static, a low, gravelly male voice emerged, shaky but clear. Don't look for her anymore. The room froze. Nolan paused, looking at Hensley. He nodded slightly. Play it from the start. The sound played again, clearer. A whirring fan, breathing close to the mic. Then the voice, low, weary, like someone talking to themselves. Don't look for her anymore. No one will find her. She's in a quiet place now. Nolan stopped the tape. Hensley stood rigid, staring at it. He asked softly, "Can you identify the voice?" "We'll run a spectral analysis," she replied. "Need a comparison sample." Hensley immediately requested a court order for Simmons' voice sample, still living in Ashboro. The next day, 2 officers recorded him saying basic sentences for comparison. "My name is Earl Simmons. I worked at Randall's. I never saw Emily Hartman again." He stayed calm, only asking, "What's there to talk about after all these years?" In the lab, voice frequency software compared the samples. Everyone held their breath. When results appeared, green italicized text flashed on the screen. Voice spectrum match, 93.4%. High confidence, exceeds forensic identification threshold. The room went silent. Nolan removed her headphones, voice trembling. "It's him." Hensley said nothing, staring at the screen where the waveforms overlapped nearly perfectly. 2 breaths, 2 frequencies, 2 voices, 39 years apart, but eerily identical. He ordered the E-tape replayed. After the opening, there were silences, then sounds. A car door opening, gravel crunching underfoot, and the male voice, lower. "She shouldn't have been there. I just wanted to talk, but she cried, and I lost control." Nolan paused, looking at Hensley. He didn't respond. The room held only the tape's steady hum, though no name was spoken. Each word and pause bared what he'd always suspected. That night, Earl Simmons waited for Emily at the Lucas Bridge, took her, and ended it all. Hensley stood frozen, picturing the Polaroid girl, standing by the truck, sunset reflecting on her face, then gone. Now, the voice of the man who buried the truth for 39 years echoed in the cold, bright room, pulling everything back like a tidal wave. When the tape ended, Hensley ordered, "Back up, preserve everything. No one touches the originals." He signed the report, then stepped into the hall. Cold wind from the corridor carried the lab's metallic scent. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. Over 40 years, he thought he'd grown used to a case unraveling, but this was different. This wasn't just a confession. It was the past soul speaking. That afternoon, he held an urgent meeting with the team. The report lay on the table, audio evidence, cassette, labeled E-DIN 1980. Male voice matches suspect Earl Simmons at 93.4%. Content includes statements implying criminal act and intent to conceal victim's body. Colby read aloud, voice stern. "If the court accepts the audio, we can prosecute." A young officer asked, "Do you think Simmons knew he was recorded?" Hensley replied slowly, "No, this was self-recorded. He made it to keep for himself, like a confession no one would hear." North Carolina State Crime Lab, September 2018. On a large screen in the chilly room, technicians began reconstructing Emily Hartman's disappearance night using Polaroid photos, 1980 topographic maps, lighting angles, and the old Lucas Bridge's location. Numbers, Coordinates and digital grids materialized, recreating the lake area as if time could rewind. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley stood behind, hands clasped, eyes glued to the 3D model. After 40 years, scattered clues now formed one story, and for the first time, he could see what really happened that night. Imaging technician Grace Nolan, who handled the tape, explained, "We combined old satellite imagery, lighting data from Raleigh Observatory, and July 17, 1980 weather. Moon illumination was 41%, light angle 27 degrees southwest. Reflected light off the water created a pale green glow, exactly what witness Laverne Cross described." Hensley nodded, recalling her words. "I saw a green light on the bridge railing." On the screen, the virtual scene emerged: the old wooden bridge, steel railing, narrow dirt road into the forest. Emily's yellow car stopped mid-bridge, headlights on. To the right was a dark shadow, the spot where the Polaroid captured the green Ford F-100. As simulated light reflected off the truck's window, the blonde girl's silhouette appeared exactly as in the real photo. "That's the camera's position," Grace said, marking a red dot. The photographer stood 14 meters from Emily's car, at the forest's edge, 0.8 meters above the bridge, matching Earl Simmons' backyard. Hensley stayed silent, eyes fixed. "So," he said softly, "the photographer was in Simmons' yard." Grace confirmed. "No doubt." Next, they modeled wind and sound using geological maps. Audio from the E-tape was analyzed for background noise. When the system matched, a 32 Hz band showed the tape's ambient sound mirrored recordings at the Lucas Bridge. Same water lapping, same crickets from the lake's east side. Hensley felt a chill. "He recorded it at the scene," he whispered. "Right after it happened." The system continued the timeline. 10:12 p.m. Emily left the vet clinic. 10:24. Her yellow car stopped on the Lucas Bridge. 10:26. The Ford F-100 appeared, left headlight dimmer. 10:28. A man stepped out, light reflecting a pale green streak on the railing. 10:30. The Polaroid was taken. 5 minutes later, both vehicles left. The yellow car was later found parked near apartments less than a mile away. Hensley leaned toward the screen, watching a glowing dot trace Emily's final path in the 3D model. It ended mid-bridge, where the truck's light merged with moonlight, then vanished into the forest shadow. He felt the past unfold before him, not theory, but truth replaying. "Zoom in on the photo's vantage point," he requested. The model shifted, a view from the photographer's position through a Polaroid lens. As the recreated image stabilized, Grace activated the final layer, shooter's eye view from reflection angles and lens curvature. On the screen, the blonde girl stood by her car, and behind the frame, faintly reflected in the window's edge, was half a face, balding forehead, high nose, downturned mouth. "No one spoke," Colby whispered. "God, that's him." Hensley stepped closer, staring. Though blurry, the cheekbone and jawline stood out. Facial recognition tested it against Earl Simmons' 1980 ID photo. Result 89.6% match. Grace said quietly, "Not just the photographer, he may be the only one left there when she vanished." Hensley's fists clenched, nails digging through gloves. In his mind, it formed one image. A July night. The yellow car stopping. The blonde girl giving a hesitant smile to a familiar face. Green light flashing over water, and the Polaroid raised. Click! Her final moment captured by the man who took her life. As the simulation ended, the room stayed silent. Grace turned off the screen, leaving one frame, the green truck in darkness, the girl's reflection faint in the glass. "We can conclude," she said. Polaroid #17 was taken at the Lucas Bridge around 10:30 p.m., July 17, 1980. The photographer stood at the forest's edge, coordinates matching Earl Simmons' backyard. The girl, per body analysis, is Emily Hartman. Hensley signed the report, staring long at the displayed photo. Cold air from the AC rustled the paper's edge. He spoke softly, barely audible. The person in the photo was the last to see her. Interrogation Room 3, Randolph County Police Station. Old yellow lights cast uneven glows on the cold metal table, leaving patchy shadows like cracked memories. Outside, light rain tapped the window, a steady rhythm signaling fall's approach. But inside, time froze on a July night 40 years ago. Earl Thomas Simmons sat at the table's end, hands clasped, wrists thin, and mottled with age spots. His short white hair and evasive eyes avoided the ceiling camera. He wore a worn shirt, collar creased, faint cheap tobacco scent lingering. Across from him was Lieutenant Marvin Hensley, who'd spent nearly half his life waiting for this moment. He placed a thick file before him, topped with the Polaroid, the blonde girl's reflection in the truck's window. The air was so heavy you could hear the clerk's pen scratching in the corner. Hensley spoke, voice rough, but steady. "Mr. Simmons, we're reinvestigating Emily Hartman's disappearance. You know why you're here?" Earl looked up, giving a faint smirk. "You've been talking about her my whole life. I don't know anything new." Hensley opened the photo, sliding it toward him. "This was found in your house, taken the night of July 17, 1980, at the Lucas Bridge, where Emily vanished. Recognize anything?" Earl glanced at it, eyes pausing on the reflection. A flicker, fear maybe, passed, then vanished. He sighed, speaking softly. "I just gave her a ride." The words hit the room like a drop on metal. Hensley stayed silent a moment, then leaned forward. "A ride? To where?" Earl avoided his gaze, fingers tapping the table. "She said she wanted to go by the lake. I just drove. Nothing to it." "Nothing?" Hensley's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Then why hide the photo? Why's there a tape with your voice saying, 'Don't look for her anymore'? And why was your truck seat fabric in her car?" Earl sat up, eyes closing. "I didn't say anything. You're hearing things I never said." Colby, taking notes, slid a paper to Hensley, the 93.4% audio match report. Hensley read slowly, then set it down, voice even and cold. "You know what makes guilt heavier, Simmons? Not the act, but the silence. And you've been silent for 39 years. Earl's lips twitched, half smile, half exhausted. "Believe what you want." She wanted to leave Ashboro. I just helped. Hensley locked eyes with him, gaze deep and sharp. "Helped how? By burying her by the Lucas Bridge?" Simmons didn't answer. Wind hissed through the door's crack, stirring the blinds. In the silence, only the recorder's steady tick, tick, tick. Then, suddenly, Earl opened his eyes, voice low as a breath. "You don't understand. I didn't do anything to her. She sat in my truck, talking about wanting to leave. The ocean, a quiet place. I drove her around the lake. She told me to stop. I did. When I came back, she was gone." Hensley asked, "Where is she?" Earl stared at his trembling hands. A long pause. Then, slowly, "Where she liked to go most." The three in the room looked up. Hensley frowned. "Where's that?" Earl leaned back, eyes distant, voice vague. "She used to say as a kid, she loved the willows by the lake," said the breeze. "There was cool. If she ever disappeared, she'd want to rest there." The room fell silent. Hensley stared at him for a long moment, then gently closed the file. "Thank you, Simmons." Earl shrugged, smirking. "I didn't help you any. She's been gone a long time." Hensley stood, the yellow light reflecting on his face, highlighting every wrinkle. "No, you helped more than you think. Your last words told us where to look." As they left the room, Colby whispered, "Think he's playing vague?" Hensley replied, eyes on the hallway. "No, a man about to break often tells the truth, just in a way no one can quite grasp." That afternoon, they gathered a search team around Lake Lucas. Hensley stood on the shore, wind blowing his notes from his hand. He looked toward the old willows on the east bank, where, 39 years ago, no one thought to dig. Earl Simmons' voice echoed in his mind, "Where she liked to go most." He knew, if Emily had said that, there was only one place she could mean, the willow grove bending over the water, where she'd often taken photos with friends on summer afternoons. Interrogation Room 3, the second consecutive night. Outside, rain fell harder, drops pounding the tin roof like time's heavy ticks. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley sat across from Earl Simmons, his eyes sunken from sleeplessness, but still sharp, resolute. A small yellow lamp cast light on the cold steel table, the only sound the steady tick of a wall clock, each beat like a countdown to the final moment. Simmons had been silent for nearly 3 hours. He sat motionless, hands on the table, cloudy eyes fixed on the tiled floor. Before him, Polaroid photos, audio report copies, and 3D simulation images spread across the table, all pointing to one place, the Lucas Bridge and the forest around the lake. Hensley said nothing more, just watched patiently, as if waiting for a faint breeze to topple a flickering flame in the other man's mind. Finally, Earl stirred, looking up. "You're not gonna stop, are you?" His voice raspy, tinged with a tremor. "No," Hensley replied slowly. "Not until she's found." Simmons gave a weak, hollow laugh. "She wanted to go. I just took her, then things went too far. I didn't mean to." Earl Hensley leaned in, voice low. "We don't need your intentions. We just need to know where she is." A long silence. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. Simmons pulled his hands from his face, shoulders shaking like an old man's. "That night," he began, "she said she wanted to go to the Willows, where you could see the lake. But then she cried, said she didn't want to go home, didn't want anyone to find her. I lost my temper. I don't know how it happened. I just remember leaving the truck, and she wasn't breathing anymore." Hensley gripped his pen, eyes never leaving Simmons. "What did you do next?" Simmons swallowed hard, voice shrinking. "I panicked. I drove around the lake, looking for a quiet spot. I stopped at the South Forest's edge, by the big oak. I dug a hole. I buried her there, wrapped in a blanket from the truck bed. I thought the rain would wash it all away." The final words fell like a belated confession. The room held only the clerk's scratching pen and the rain's roar outside. Hensley sat still, his heart beating slow and heavy. For 40 years, he'd waited for this. A dry sentence, but carrying the soul of the case. He opened a map, spreading it before Simmons. "Show me," he said. Simmons stared at the faded map, trembling hands tracing the lake's edge. "Here," he whispered, his fingertips stopping at the south corner, marked Old Hickory Field. Under the big oak, the ground was soft, mossy, about 50 steps from the water. Hensley nodded, signaling Colby outside. "Prep the scene team. Seal off the South Forest of Lake Lucas. No one in or out within a mile radius." He stood, eyes still on Simmons. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "We'll bring her home." As he left the room, Hensley paused in the hallway. He leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. The rain outside pounded harder, reflecting the red-blue flash of police lights through the glass. A young officer ran up, reporting, "Forensics and search units are at the scene, sir." Hensley nodded, set up high-powered lights, prepped the grid. The South Forest of Lake Lucas blazed under the white glow of dozens of generators. Police cars lined the shore, their lights reflecting red and blue on the still water. The sounds of machinery, boots in mud, and shovels digging mixed with the heavy damp of the night. No one spoke loudly. Whispers were swallowed by the sacred weight of the moment. 40 years of waiting nearing its end. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley stood in the forest, misty rain speckling his coat, his face etched with exhaustion, but eyes steadfast. Before him, the massive oak loomed under floodlights, its trunk wide, roots sprawling like giant arms guarding the earth's secret. A few steps away, the forensic team dug the final layers around the burial site, Simmons indicated. The smell of wet earth and rust, of time choked beneath the lake, seeped into every breath. A shovel hit something hard. A technician bent down, brushing mud. "Something's here," he called. Everyone stopped. Hensley stepped forward, shining his flashlight. Beneath the wet earth, a corner of dark beige fabric emerged. It wasn't tarp, but something softer, more fragile, like clothing material. The forensic team worked in utter silence, using small brushes to clear the surrounding dirt. slowly revealing an object's shape. A long frayed cloth, embroidered with small silver thread. Hensley froze. He recognized it instantly. The embroidered cloth found in 1985, dismissed as meaningless, and stored for 30 years. He stared, feeling his chest tighten. It can't be, he thought. But the white light illuminated the silver thread, still intact despite its decay. Dig around it, slowly, he said softly. Each shovel stroke was gentle. A small bone appeared, then gradually, a human skeleton emerged from the dark brown earth. Arm bones, ribs, then a skull, all curled, arms crossed over the chest, as if shielding itself in its final moment. The floodlights glinted on the mud-streaked bones. No one spoke. Hensley knelt, lightly touching the shoulder of the forensic tech beside the pit. "Lift it carefully, piece by piece," he said. "This is her." A clear evidence bag was prepared. They gently wrapped the remains, old fabric scraps, and faint strands of hair. The cloth was folded separately, placed on top. Hensley stood watching, rain misting his white hair, mingling with drops on his cheeks. Rain or tears, he wasn't sure. By the lakeshore, high-powered lights swept the water. Fog drifted low, reflecting light like silver silk over the forest. Officers kept their distance, hats lowered. Many were born after 1980. But that night, all felt the weight of history reviving. When the final bag was sealed, Hensley turned to Colby, voice rough. "Get it to Raleigh's forensic lab tonight. I want DNA results before sunrise." Colby nodded, signaling the team to load the evidence. Two techs carried the sealed bag carefully, lights glinting on the clear nylon. Inside, the remains of a girl who vanished without a trace. Hensley stayed behind. He circled the oak, flashlight sweeping its roots. Beneath his feet, the muddy ground squelched, the metallic scent of an old shovel lingering. He bent down, picking up a small object in the mud, a pearl button, cloudy, cracked at the edge. He studied it, then set it back down, a quiet closure to a belated apology. 2 days later, North Carolina's forensic lab released results. The 2-page report carried the weight of stone, DNA comparison, bone sample from South Lake Lucas Forest matches, stored hair sample of Emily Hartman. 99.98% match. Reading the final line, Hensley was speechless. He set the report down, looking out at the gray sky. Below, Lake Lucas lay still, as if nothing had happened. Only a few waterfowl skimming the surface, leaving ripples that faded fast. He called the sheriff's office, voice low but clear. "It's her. We found Emily." News spread quickly. Media swarmed the lake shore, reporters' camera lights reflecting on the water, mirroring the searchlights from the excavation night. But this time, it wasn't a hopeless hunt. It was the light of truth. Fall 2019, Courtroom 1 was packed. Golden light poured from the high ceiling, illuminating worn brown benches. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley sat in the second row behind the prosecution, uniform crisp, hands gripping his old notebook. Before him, the prosecution table overflowed with files, cassette tapes, Polaroids, DNA reports, and the cloth in a clear case. Each piece carried time sent, not just evidence, but witnesses to 4 decades. When Earl Simmons was let in, the room hushed. At 70, he was gaunt, hands trembling slightly, eyes holding a mix of defiance and exhaustion. Handcuffed, he scanned the crowd, pausing briefly on Hensley. Their eyes met for seconds, a lifetime of pursuit in one glance. The seeker of truth, and the one fleeing it. The judge's gavel struck, voice resonant. Court is in session. Case 79-214, State of North Carolina versus Earl Thomas Simmons. Charges: first-degree murder, kidnapping, and destruction of evidence. Prosecutor Charlotte Raines stepped to the podium, voice ringing, firm. "Your Honor, this case slept for nearly 40 years. But truth never dies. Today we'll show, with physical, audio, visual, and DNA evidence, that defendant Simmons brought young Emily Hartman to her death." She presented each piece. First, Polaroid #17, projected on a large screen. The dim yellow light, green truck, and blonde girl's reflection in the window. "This is the last image of Emily Hartman, alive," Charlotte said. And the man holding the camera was the defendant. The screen shifted to the 3D simulation, showing the shot's angle matching Simmons' backyard. Murmurs rose. Some spectators bowed their heads, others teared up. Next, the prosecution played the cassette audio. The sound filled the room, a low, gravelly male voice, shaky, halting. "Iscock. Don't look for her anymore. No one will find her. She's in a quiet place now." Some in the back covered their mouths. Hensley sat still, hand trembling. Charlotte stepped toward the defendant's table, pointing, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this voice matches Earl Simmons at 93.4%. He recorded his own confession." The prosecution presented the DNA report, excavation photos, and the cloth, evidence forgotten for 33 years. "This was found with the victim's remains," she said. "The silver thread matches the 1985 cloth exactly. Emily Hartman was finally found with the very cloth she carried." The prosecution closed with lighting data comparisons. Photo location, Lucas Bridge coordinates, wind direction, water sounds on the tape, all aligned. "Not coincidence," she concluded, "but a plan. A man living 300 meters from the bridge, owning a truck with a guitar sticker, as the sole witness described. And when asked, he said, 'She's where she liked to go most.' That, ladies and gentlemen, was directions to her grave." The defense attorney, a gray-haired man, stood. "Your Honor, we don't deny the loss, but my client is no cold-blooded killer. This was an accident, a moment of lost control." He pointed to the Polaroid. "No evidence shows intent to kill. The photo only captures a conversation. No witnesses, no violent wounds, just a man's mistake." The prosecution played Simmons' interrogation excerpt. "I buried her at the South Forest's edge." The room held its breath. "An accident?" Charlotte's voice sharpened. "Then why bury her? Hide the car, record a confession, and stay silent for 39 years. Accidents don't need shovels and graves." In the gallery, some wept. Emily's mother, nearing 80, sat in the middle, clutching silver rosary beads. When excavation photos appeared, she bowed her head, trembling. Hensley leaned forward, gently touching her shoulder, saying nothing. Just a touch to affirm old promises kept. The trial lasted 5 days. Experts testified, DNA analysts, audio specialists, image restoration techs, forensic examiners, all confirmed the evidence's accuracy. When arguments closed, the judge handed the case to the jury. Hensley sat in silence as the deliberation room door shut. He watched light filter through an old stained glass window, dim but warm. A light he never thought he'd see in this case 40 years ago as a young cop. 3 hours later, the door opened. The jury filed in, the forewoman, a middle-aged woman, holding a folded paper. The room stood. Her voice rang clear. "The jury finds defendant Earl Thomas Simmons guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and destruction of evidence." The judge nodded, voice firm sentence. "Life imprisonment without parole." The gavel struck 3 times, echoing through the room. Simmons bowed his head, silent. A guard cuffed him, leading him between rows of hushed onlookers. Passing Hensley, he glanced over, eyes cloudy, but with a cold glint. Hensley met his gaze, calm. Their eyes locked briefly, the gaze of a guilty man, and one carrying memory. Outside, autumn wind carried the lake's scent. Light rain fell, drops pooling on the stone steps. Hensley stepped out, looking at the gray sky, clouds rolling past. He knew, at last, it was over. He opened his old notebook, writing the case's final line, one he'd pursued half his life. Randolph County Court, jury verdict, guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, evidence destruction. Sentence, life without parole. After 39 years, Lake Lucas returned justice to Emily Hartman and fulfilled an unfinished oath. He closed the notebook, standing in the thin rain. In his memory, he saw that old moonlight on the lake, the blonde girl smiling, and heard the wind rustling the willows, whispering, "Finally, I'm home. The story of Emily Hartman and Lake Lucas is not just a closed criminal case after 40 years, but a reflection of real issues in today's American society, where justice may come late, but never vanishes. Lieutenant Marvin Hensley's persistence, rereading a torn file page and reopening the case, reminds us of the importance of faith in truth, even when time and systemic apathy seem to bury it. In modern America, where data, technology, and social media can sweep people away too fast, this story shows justice isn't about speed, but endurance. The cloth, overlooked for 30 years yet key to solving the mystery, is a powerful metaphor. Small things, a word, a memory, or seemingly meaningless evidence can change a story if revisited with patient, honest eyes. In today's America, where misinformation and bias spread rapidly, we must learn to pause, observe details, and hear the overlooked, whether a truth, a person, or a cry for help. Finally, Hensley's report line, "Truth doesn't die, it sleeps beneath the water," reminds every citizen, no matter how complex society becomes, truth, compassion, and justice endure, waiting for those who dare to believe, search, and never turn away. In today's America, that's not just a cop's lesson, it's everyone's moral duty. Thank you for joining us to the end of the Lake Lucas journey, where truth, after 40 years, was finally revealed. If you believe justice never sleeps, subscribe to our channel to explore more cold cases in our next video.